Hey crafters, thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to be making a winter birthday card with some beautiful Lavinia stamps. And the best part is, it's a shaker card. I don't know about you, but I have a few winter birthdays coming up, so I wanted to make some winter themed, more masculine cards. So I'm starting with some broken china distress oxide, and I'm just putting this around my circle mask. This mask is from Lavinia Stamps, but you could always use a circle die if you prefer. Then I'm going to add my second color, which is Mermaid Lagoon. And once I've put it down roughly on the paper, I'll blend it going back and forth between the two blues. Now I used a blue theme for this card, but I will show you another color theme at the end of the video. So you can always change it up. But I find that using darker colors and these sorts of shades work really well for winter cards. So my third color here is Chip Sapphire. This is also Distress Oxide. And once I've got that on the edges, I will blend it into my Mermaid Lagoon. And just to add a finishing touch to the outside of the card and to draw the eye in, I'm going to add some little bits of black around the edges. I don't have black soot in Distress Oxide, so I just used my Distress ink for this. You can always mix in your Distress inks with your oxides. Just be wary that Distress inks will always win. So it's hard to take them and remove them once they're on the card. So now I'm just going to blend that black in a little bit with the Chip Sapphire until I'm happy with the card. So now that I've got the background completed, I can add some snow to my card. I'm going to remove the mask and clean it and then reapply it. Now I don't have acrylic ink, so what I'm going to use instead is some white pigment ink. This is the Unicorn White from Hero Arts. And then I'll just add a little bit of water and splat it onto the background. If you're lucky enough to have some acrylic paint, that would probably work best. But as you can see, this still works well. Now because I've mixed this pigment ink with water, I need to make sure that I dry it with my heat tool before it starts to react with the Distress Oxide. And I just removed the mask before doing this. So now I'm going to start stamping some of my Lavinia stamp images. So I'm going to be using ash, but before I add them on, I'm going to make sure that I put some tree branches across the top of the sky. And I just placed ash on the card just so I could see where I wanted him to be roughly. So one of the great things about this tree branch is that you can flip it around and do either side of the card. It also works really well coming from the top or the bottom. So it's one of my favorite Lavinia stamps. It's so versatile. Now I'm just using some Memento ink for this. So as you can notice, it sort of fades on the Distress Oxide and it gives it a bit of a dreamy look. If you wanted your ink to be darker and show up more on the oxide, then I would recommend a different ink for that, something like a VersaFine Claire. As you can see, the brown is a lot darker on the white area of the card rather than on the areas with the Distress Oxide. So now I'm going to stamp my main images, and I'm going to stamp ash with some VersaFine Onyx black. And I'm just going to position him mostly on the white moon, a little bit on the bottom of the card. And then I will also stamp Broadwin, who's a flying owl, and he's going to be towards the top of the moon there. Now when you use VersaFine on Distress Oxide, you can see it underneath, but I will fix this a little bit later with some Copic markers. So once I'm happy with the positioning of Broadwin, I'll add him onto the card as well. Now, like I said, you can always stamp these images with something like a VersaFine Claire, and that will give you a darker image. But sometimes as crafters, you have to make do with the supplies that you have. So I'm just going to darken these a little bit with my black Copic marker until they're nice and dark and the Distress Oxide doesn't show through. So now I'm going to use my silver Jelly Roll pen and just add an outline around the moon. It just adds a little bit of sparkle. It shows up better in real life. Once I'm happy with that, I'm going to start adding in some more snow. I think the secret to a good snow scene is to add in lots of different sizes and textures of snowflakes. So I'm going to use my white Jelly Roll pen to add some snow on the trees and then add some in the background. And this will combine with the snowflakes that I've already added with the unicorn white pigment ink. And once I'm happy with all that snow, I'll add in my third type of snow along the bottom of the card. So for my third type of snow, I'm just going to take a spare piece of white card and rip it so that the rip is exposed. And I'm going to take the piece that I've torn and glue it on top of the other piece. So I've created two snowdrifts here. And you can see this gives you a great texture, which looks a lot like snow. So I'm going to glue this onto the bottom of the card. And then I'll just trim off the excess on the bottom and the sides there. And the last bit of snow I'm going to add is just on that snowdrift on the bottom. I'm going to use my white Nouveau drops and I'm going to add some texture onto that snowdrift. And this will just add some interest on the bottom part of our card. So now I'll set this aside to dry completely before I do some die cutting. So now I'm going to turn my card into a shaker card. Now the die I'm using is 4 1/4 by 5 1/4 and my paper is 5 by 7. So I'm going to move the die off the cutting plates so that only the bottom area is cut, and then I'll move my die up and repeat on the top. And that way I don't have to have the exact size of die. I can just use the supplies that I have. So I'll just move it the other way so that the bottom half of the die is not under my cutting plates or between my cutting plates. And you're left with this beautiful frame. Now I'm going to adhere my outside frame to some acetate, and I've just used double-sided tape for this. And the great thing about doing a shaker card this way is that the frame of the shaker card matches beautifully and it has that pattern on it. Now I'm going to put some double-sided foam on the outside frame. Now once I've gone all the way around the outside of the frame, I'm going to remove the tape and add a second layer. And that way it will be approximately 2 millimeters thick. Now I created a different version of this card without the shaker component, which you'll see at the end of this video, so you can see the difference that the shaker makes. So now I'm going to adhere the inside of my panel onto a piece of 5 by 7 inch card, and I'm just checking it with my frame to make sure it's positioned properly. So once I'm happy with it, I'm going to apply my anti-static pouch to the acetate and then put my iridescent circles onto the card base. Then I'm going to stick my acetate window on and test my card to make sure there's no leakage. I just love the way this card works, and I can't wait to give it to the recipient. So now I'm going to adhere it to a 5 by 7 inch card blank. And as this is a birthday card, I'm going to add a birthday sentiment inside. My favorite stamp set for sentiments is a Hero Arts one. And I'm going to use this nice, bold, happy birthday. And then I'm going to stamp Malin, who's another Lavinia stamp owl. And I'm going to put him on the inside of the card as well. Now I have another version of this card that you'll see in a moment with Malin inside, but I used a different sentiment. So here's my completed card. And then, as promised, I made one in a different color scheme. This is for a colleague who's leaving our workplace. And my third card without the shaker element for a different recipient with a more appropriate sentiment for them. I hope you enjoyed watching this shaker card video. Be sure to subscribe so that you're notified whenever I post a new video. Have a crafty day!